Welcome to Regulated and Relational, a bi-monthly podcast brought to you by the Attachment and Trauma Network. In today's episode, Callie Flox is in the studio with Julie and Ginger, sharing her valuable insights on the power of the arts as a therapeutic tool, both at home and in the classroom. Whether you're a longtime listener or joining us for the first time, we're so glad you're here. We know that you'll be enlightened by what Callie has to teach us all today. So let's join them.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Regulated and Relational, our podcast produced by the Attachment and Trauma Network. I'm Ginger Healy.
And I'm Julie Beem.
And we're excited to share with you from both our personal experiences and our professional knowledge what it truly means to be attachment-focused, trauma-informed, and how we can help children impacted by early childhood trauma. Today, we are so excited to introduce to you a very special guest and friend of ATN. Julie, will you introduce everybody to Callie Flox?
Gladly. Callie Flox, we're so happy to have Callie in the studio. She is a teaching artist, educator, and administrator, as well as the lead author on a teacher's guide to resilience through the arts. And if you're looking at us in video, I'm showing you the book right now so that you can see that, and it'll be in our show notes. How cool!
I should have brought my book into the studio too. I love
Ginger,
my book.
I beat you. Normally you're the one with all the books and the props and so we're there, but we love Callie. So of course we both have her book, right? She is the founding director at the BYU ARTS Partnership, which enhances student learning and school culture through professional development for educators in the arts. Each year, she provides professional development to over 1,000 teachers through conferences, workshops, and a 16-credit-hour endorsement program. Callie has presented at numerous regional, national, and international conferences, including Creating Trauma-Sensitive Schools, which we love having her. She's done keynotes and has led extended residencies. She has extensive experience teaching creative dance and integrative arts to individuals of all ages in both private and public settings, with additional training in brain-compatible multisensory learning strategies. Callie's teaching background includes instructing dance, math, and physical education in public schools. She's done a lot, right? And she holds a Master's of Education in Educational Leadership. Welcome, Callie.
Thanks. It's really fun to be here. I have so much respect for the work that you guys do, and you each individually contribute so much to this body of work in your writings, your experiences, and the conference that you offer. It's really fun to be part of this with you.
Thanks, Callie. And we're so glad that you're in the studio with us today because we know that our listeners are going to learn a lot. We're going to learn a lot because we've never had this conversation with you before. So this is going to be exciting for us. You've got such a varied background in the arts. Can you tell us how you got here? Like, how did you become Callie Flox?
So I'm a person who always needed to move, and I fell in love with dance. So I grew up dancing. I started college thinking I needed to do something serious like medical school or something. And I ended up with a math minor because I'd gone far enough into pre-med work that when I finally went, wait, I got to do something that brings more joy. I just need to relax and enjoy my life. And I got a dance scholarship and finished my degree in dance. But I still have a love for the sciences. And I love math. I love the sciences. I love the brain research. And that initial part of me that wanted to go into medicine never went away. So I found that as I was teaching dance and raising my family, I would do wonderful creative movement things with people, and they would discover something in their body, and they would come and tell me what they experienced. And they would say, oh, I had this great epiphany. I learned something about my child that I've been really worried about, or all these epiphanies would come to them every time they moved. Then I ran into the world of educational kinesiology, and I started learning about the neuroscience and how all of it's wired together. And I started saying, oh, so when they move, this happens. But now they're teaching me if I do these kinds of movements, then I can actually help guide people to some of the desired outcomes that they want. And I learned to go both directions. So to back up just a little, one time I was teaching a middle school dance class, and there were 15 middle school girls who were very insecure in their bodies, and they were beginning dancers. And that was kind of my forte of how to introduce people to movement, how to help them feel comfortable in their bodies. And one night we had this magical class. We were doing simple things about leading and following. And you would mirror a partner, and then you would turn and they would shadow you. And then if you became a larger group of people moving, then that's a flock of people moving all together. And I watched this group of girls who maybe had danced now for 3 or 4 months. To get them to do this activity, I had to turn out the lights. It had to be darker. They couldn't feel self-conscious. And they started moving, and they would find a partner and they'd follow that partner for a minute, then they would break away, somebody would follow them. Sometimes they would end up moving as a whole group as they started following each other. Then they would break apart into duets and trios, and they went nonverbal for a solid 20 minutes. And I just stood there with my jaw on the floor and went, wow, this is magical. They were communicating through their intuition, through their bodies, through their all of the ways that dancers are supposed to communicate, and they were discovering it in these movement conversations as they traveled through the space. Well, the evening, that dance moment ended as they ran out of energy. They all found their finishing shape and the energy settled. And I called them into a circle to talk. And we talked about, are you more comfortable leading? Are you more comfortable following? Are you comfortable in a large group or in a small group? What did you learn about yourself in this experience? And these girls, middle school's tough.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
This is tough stuff. And these girls really opened up with, oh, I understand what's happening here. And the epiphany started popping, and it came out. I got a letter the next day from one of the girls that said, I finally figured out middle school. I now understand the whole social structure of middle school. And I went, oh, how did we get there?
Wow.
But she said, some people are leaders and some people are followers. And when you change that role, and sometimes you step up and follow, and sometimes you step back, and sometimes you lead from behind, and sometimes, it's all these different ways of making room for people and stepping up when it's your turn. And she explained how middle school social structure works from our dance class the night before.
Gosh.
So we brought that back into class. And that's when I really started realizing I'm not in charge of what people learned, but if I give them movement experiences, they will learn whatever it is they need to know. And when I put it with the neuroscience and I say, okay, so when I was teaching math and needing ways to relax people and saying, what kind of movement can I give these kids to prepare them for this test? What kind of movement can I give them to help them be more aware of their bodies? It started furthering how the body and the brain are connected in actual practice, in activities in the classroom or in the family. One particularly stressful time in my family's life, my husband plays guitar, and he'd pull out his guitar, and I would watch my kids just lay on the floor and melt. And they'd pull out their sketchbooks and they would start drawing and they would unwind. And it would happen naturally and authentically because that's his thing, is he plays guitar. And when I watched the benefit of that to my children, I started realizing we can insert these things. We can deliberately bring them into our lives to nourish us. So, then you bring in the academia, and we know that every civilization on Earth has evidence of all of the arts. The most primitive people, in fact, the most primitive people they drew, they made instruments, they danced, they told stories, they did theatrical reenactments. The arts always exist, and they are hardwired into our neurophysiology. And these are languages that we speak universally around the world that have always been part of civilization. So it's hardwired into our DNA. And when we invite it into our daily lives, it's more powerful than we can ever imagine, because it's part of the oldest parts of our DNA. And that means, how do we not take
Yeah.
time to bring these things into our lives. They speak to us in some of the most deep ways possible. Okay, so
Amazing.
I'll take a
I
breath
love that.
for a minute.
I know. So
Um,
many things, right? Like there's just so many things buzzing around me. I mean, first it speaks to how important it is. And so then I'm like, why isn't it being used more? Or why is recess being taken away, or art or music or all those things when it really is hardwired into our DNA? So there's so much there we could talk about. And I was thinking as you were talking about the movement and the dance, that makes more sense to me as I've learned about the neuroscience and how that's how you relieve stress hormones and chase them out of your body is by introducing, endorphins and movement. Movement's the most efficient way to release those stress hormones. So I was thinking about that. And then I
Not
was
only
thinking,
releasing the stress hormones, just the development of your neurophysiology comes from movement. If you think of the children in a car seat, if their movement is restricted, their brain does not develop. The very beginning of rolling over and your eyes tracking when you're crawling and the cross-patterning movement and the relationships, touch, movement, and relationships are the only thing that create new neural pathways. So you're actually building the neural pathways from the body to the brain through the movement. It's literal. If you're not moving, you're not building brain tissue. Now, that sounds pretty absolute because we know that people who are unable to move because of certain situations in their physicality, they still can become very bright. Their body compensates in other ways. But most directly, it's movement and exercise that creates neurophysiology. Even there's, I read research recently about the quickest way to make new neural pathways right in the hippocampus is exercise and movement. And they track that very directly. And so, yeah, we want to get people moving.
That's
Yeah.
fascinating. And those of us who have who've adopted from situations where our children were not allowed to move, they spent a lot of time in cribs. They, didn't developmentally get the opportunities that a lot of children do now, where there's a lot of floor time play for them as infants. We learned the hard way how that impacted them. It impacted their sensory systems and all kinds of learning systems, really.
And dance and movement can help compensate for some of that. There's a lot of research with Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's that dance is one of the most very powerful treatments for allowing regulation to come back to the movement and stimulating the parts of the brain and the body to work together in sync again. Dance is very powerful.
Very powerful. Let's also talk about like the other ways, because when you started talking about your husband and the guitar, that brought in the music. And then you said your kids got out their sketch pads and that was an expression for them. So let's kind of start talking about other art forms and how that heals too, and how to incorporate all of that.
Okay, so in the arts, you can be a consumer of the arts or a partaker or participant, or you can be a creator. And there are benefits on both sides. So we can divide it into visual arts and performing arts just for ease of conversation. And as an observer in visual arts, we'll start there. You take the time to reflect and notice an image, a sculpture, a movie, some kind of something that's happening in the visual art world. And the aesthetics of a beautifully set table or beautifully prepared food, those visual pieces that speak to us on unconscious levels. As an observer, it's important that we prepare the palate of the person partaking of the art, or we cultivate the senses in order to interpret and take in and consume the art. Cultivating our senses to, are we seeing? Are we hearing? Are we tasting? Are we touching? Now, for me as a mover, I use body senses too. So balance, proprioception, all of that. And I want to pause for just a minute. We'll come back to visual art. But thinking of the senses, you guys teach a lot about the interoception and how important interoception is. So I want to think about for a minute that if we consider interoception and how you are analyzing what's happening on the inside of you, and then we think about the sensory integration, there is an internal landscape happening in our bodies all of the time. And when we learn to read how our stomach feels and how our heart is racing and how the temperature in our skin changes, we become much more in tune with our surroundings as we become in tune with ourselves. We're so seldom taught with explicit instruction how to be aware of what's happening inside of us. We're more often taught about the external landscape. What do I have to do? I have to go do this and do that, and I have to produce this, and I have to create that. But it's when we have the internal landscape awareness as well as the external landscape awareness that we can propel further towards our goals more efficiently because they can be aligned and in tune. And we know that energy follows intention. So if we set an intention to say, I'll go back to, I want this math problem to be easier, or I need to sit down and read this book. That's what I intend to do. Now, how is my internal landscape? Oh, I got to relax. I need to stretch. I have a funny feeling in my stomach. Oh, but you become aware. Now, my external landscape, do I have enough light? Do I have the pencils? Do I need to have my highlighter? But we need to take time to do both the internal landscape and the external landscape to prepare towards the goal that we want to accomplish. So we can learn those skills by starting with a piece of art. And when you just look at a piece of art, this is the time to say, what does it make me feel inside? I see colors, I see shapes, I see definitions, I see a story happening. This is what I think is happening in this piece of artwork. Oh, and this is what it makes me wonder about. So that's a simple thinking routine to say, I think, I wonder. And there are hundreds of thinking routines. Harvard Project Zero, if you Google thinking routines, they have hundreds of them for specific reasons. But those thinking routines help us reflect on what's happening in the world so that we can create a climate inside that's worth reading, right? So this painting is having an impact on me. So, I have several back here. These are dance paintings, 3 very different dance paintings. My daughter dancing, my favorite artist painting children dancing, and a Native American dancer. And each of them elicits a completely different emotional response. Each of them has a completely different story. And what it does to my internal landscape, I can track the change of that through interoception as I notice. It will change my emotional, the homeostasis of the emotions that I'm feeling. It will elicit something new. And then if I decide to do something, I can move to my external situation and say, oh, I want to go paint like that. I'm going to draw geometric shapes. I'm going to draw some shapes about movement. Or, I'm a dancer. I'm going to do that. I have to get up and move and propel. But it's that internal and external landscape that we want to do. So let's say we'll go into the performing arts and we're still listening. We're still the partakers. I listen to music. Am I listening to notice how that music changes me internally? Am I listening to see what does it do to my heart rate? What does it do to my breath rate? What does it do to the colors in my stomach? What does it do to my muscle tension? How does it help me relax? What is my response to that music? And when we get in touch with our internal landscape, then we can start using the arts to serve us in ways that improve and help us self-regulate, improve our own awareness and help us self-regulate.
I think, Callie, stop there and repeat that, because that is really important. Like, most of us don't make that next step, right? We're looking at things, we're partaking of them, as you're saying, but then, you just said something so powerful about, and then when we are aware, say all of that again. That was so good about the regulation.
So the first step is to notice how the art impacts you. And then once you realize how it impacts you, you can make choices when you get dysregulated to say, here are the things that help me self-regulate. Here are the things I like. What are my aesthetic preferences? We need to be able to turn to more than chocolate. Okay. to help us feel better. So when we understand our aesthetic values, we can say, oh, this kind of painting, this kind of music, this kind of story, what is it that will help me self-regulate and help me find my center? What is it that aligns my internal landscape in a way that propels me in a way that I like, that helps me move forward in the world with the type of expressions that I want to bring with me, with the type of emotions and feelings I want to carry? And how do I set intentions to improve my internal landscape?
Wow. I
Is
think
that
you
what you
just
meant?
explained why I crank up rock music sometimes when I'm driving.
Every time my husband gets in my car and the music's turned on loud, he's like, oh, why do you do that? It always scares him. It's like, yeah, because when I'm driving alone, I want my music loud. I want to feel that beat.
That's right.
And I want to be able to sing at the top of my lungs and not be
Yes.
able to hear myself. So I turn it up really
Yes.
loud.
Yes. Yeah. And there's something very cathartic about that. It really does release a lot of tension for me to do that.
Well, me too. And I think Ginger hit on something that we do it, but then if it's going to become powerful, we have to reflect on why it works and what do we like.
Mm-hmm.
Become a more beneficial tool when we bring awareness and attentiveness to what it can do for us. It's not that it just makes us feel better. It's
Right.
now when I'm really down, what is it that makes me feel the best? What is it that I need right now? I only have 1 minute before I have to go into this next meeting, and that person just knocked my socks right and my whole right out from underneath me. And I have 1 minute to recover. Whew, what am I going to do? And if I know what song calms my heart, I can think it to myself. If I know I need to walk, wow, I have 1 minute, I'm walking down that hall and back while singing this song. And I have more tools to help me recover, just as a participator and observer in the arts.
Right.
Maybe people have a poem. Maybe there's certain words. We know the power of words, the
Yeah.
deliciousness of a great poem or the lyrics to a song. I have a colleague here at the university. He talks in Billy Joel song titles. One 80s music song titles. It is so funny, but that is his language when he was coming of
Yeah.
age. And those songs are deep in him, and he can just rip off,
Love it.
there's just these funny lines that make everybody happy and put people at ease. And humor is one of the best things to help us relax and recover and restore
Yeah.
this moment. Except I was with my grandson the other day and thought I was using humor when he got hit on the head with some blocks. And I said, oh, is there blood? Is there a dent in your head? Wasn't funny to him. I found out when he knocked his tooth out and there was blood all over, he's still traumatized. So I thought I was doing humor. And it's like, oh, this isn't funny to you. Okay. I forgot you got your teeth knocked out and there was blood all over. So we have to be careful with humor.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure.
Oh, that's so good.
Okay, so we've just been through a consumer of the arts and the interoception and the internal landscape and the external landscape and how you can manage those. So now let's talk for a minute about being an art maker, a creator. Okay? Anything you learn under stress, you'll always recall with that same stress because it gets wired through the limbic system, right? So if it gets wired through a stressful history and the memory of that association is stressful, you're going to always use that as stressful. And many of our kids, something as simple as picking up a pencil or a pen to write, if they learn to write during a stressful time in their life, they may be holding their pen like this, with a full fist. They may be pushing so hard because they're trying to keep up with their neighbor or their friend that they're not as good as. We don't know what causes the stress, but we know that there's so much that brings stress to making 100-letter Ds on a page or making 500-letter Es to try to keep this practice going. And when you approach this same writing instrument from an artful and creative place, your body has a chance to rewire that neurophysiology into holding a pen or a pencil with pleasure and with joy. So you start with making marks on pages, with making, from Brain Gym, it would be that infinity sign, the lazy 8. And if you do that in a relaxed way with both hands, with no expectations, and you use the dominant and non-dominant hand, and you just think about making marks with no expectation and no stress, just for the pleasure. And you push hard with a pencil, and then you push lightly with a pencil. Or you bring up the crayons and you see how dark they can go, or the oil pastels, or the watercolors. All of that gives you the fine motor development with pleasure. And when the child comes back to make their D's and their F's and their G's, they have brand new neurophysiology coming to that writing instrument because they've rewired it into a different part of their brain. In one of the large districts that we work with, is we've taught these principles to teachers, that drawing with your kids for 10 minutes before you ask them to write will invite in a more positive neurological experience. We have teachers saying they don't make their kids trace letters anymore, maybe 10% of what they used to, because by drawing for 10 to 15 minutes first, that neurophysiology gets turned on, the kids are relaxed, and their work is automatically improved and better.
Mm-hmm.
So by teaching teachers and parents to watch for these things, we are not only helping us understand our bodies and look at our stress signals, but then we start reading the children's bodies and say,
Right.
oh, you've got a lot of stress in that writing instrument. And how can we relax that? And you start helping children reduce their stress before you ask them to do the hard things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's particularly with basic drawing and fine motor skills, we have a lot of stress around that in our schools, doing things over and over again. And
that we didn't really recognize or, realize. And that's such a simple fix, Callie, that you've just mentioned that can totally be easily done. I've often said when I'm talking to teachers, like, connect before content, right? Or connect before correction. And this is kind of a form of that, where you're creating this safe space rather than, okay, here's what we're going to do, and you're going to do it right, and it's going to be hard. It's like, it's relaxing them so that they can do more and do better and not have that negative association, creating that new neural pathway. I love what you've just told us.
Yeah.
that idea of connect first is, let's just go deeper into your idea. You're connecting with the children emotionally, right? And you're making a connection because we know all learning happens within a relationship, and that's going to optimize learning. So you're inviting the child to connect with you. Then you take a minute, you invite the child to connect with themselves. How does that feel to you? What do you need? Do you need to stand and stretch for a minute? Do you need a drink of water? What do you need? Connect with yourself. Now we're connected and you're connected internally. And now let's play. Pick up your pen with your non-dominant hand. Pick it up with your dominant hand. Make a few marks on the page. Even hold your pens, one in each hand, and do your double doodles from Brain Gym. Just relax and play with playing with that pen. All right, pull out your math worksheet and let's take a look at what our next problem is. But when you allow them to connect with themselves, with their own neurophysiology, and you have that connection with you in that relationship, they are already 10 lessons ahead to start doing the difficult work that academics requires.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, good.
And I'm just thinking about that in terms of parents then too, and parents allowing for the exploration of those tools, even with little ones before they show up in elementary school, right? To be able to explore and use and with no expectation of learning to write your name, for example, or whatever it is, right? That you just get comfortable with it, because then you don't show up with a preconceived angst around using a pen or a pencil, right? So
we want to take advantage of the idea that they have free choice and free exploration. Kids learn really quickly that Susie's picture looks better than their own picture, and that Johnny's Abe Lincoln, the hat actually fits on the Abe Lincoln's head, but on my Abe Lincoln, my hat's still floating over his head, and I don't know why. And sometimes we have this perception that art is a gift. And art isn't a gift. People work very hard for their art skills. It's a skill that has to be practiced. But what happens in schools, because the arts are marginalized and kids don't get enough instruction, it reinforces some people are either good at art or not good at art. But the child who's good at art probably has a grandma who sits and draws with them once a week. It's a skill that's developed like any other. And if we can slow down and show them the skills, here's 2-point perspective, here's shading and shadowing, 10 minutes a day, will start to see. And it will not only improve their ability to represent their ideas graphically, but it will improve their ability to see shadows and to see how lighting changes, to see details. There's a wonderful research study of a biology teacher in college who they were doing like frog cadavers and people cadavers, and the students were unable to tell tendons from muscles from ligaments. She had to go back and teach them basic drawing before they had the visual discernment ability to see the distinctions in the neuroanatomy. In the anatomy, not neuroanatomy, in the topical anatomy. Basic drawing helps us learn to see and decode and decipher. And we live in a world with visual images all around us. So if we're not helping kids slow down, look, notice, see, watch, they're missing most of the information in the world around them.
That is so cool. That is amazing.
So what does that make you think of, Ginger?
Well, okay. I have been absolutely guilty of saying, because I have believed it's true, that I don't have artistic abilities and that my kids do, because I do feel like my kids are very talented and artistic, and I don't feel like I'm a good art drawer, so I've heard myself say those words and maybe not appreciate how hard they've worked, or doubted my abilities, like stopped myself right there, cut myself off from having more opportunity, experience, and maybe developing, the chance to develop that.
Yeah. So we have the opportunity in the initiatives that I run to bring non-artists together and professional developments to experiment and explore and learn the arts. So we used to do this 10-day training, 2 days at a time. And the first 2 days, they had to try something in every art form. Now, for adults who have already decided they are not artists, this is very intimidating. And my husband taught first grade for 30 years. He taught school for 42 years, but they didn't let him out of first grade for 30 years, and he loved it. He drew every day. So he has this wonderful gift of drawing with beginners all of the time. So he was always the first teacher that we would give. This room of 30 teachers would sit down and draw with this teacher who had worked with first graders for 30 years. And he knows a different definition of beginning, where to start at the very beginning. And one particular teacher, she actually was in the bathroom. We were at a hotel in Park City. It was beautiful. We took them to this beautiful place. And that morning they were to spend the next 2 hours drawing, right? 2 or 3 hours. She's in the bathroom in tears, calling her husband, "Come get me out of here. They're going to make me draw." Okay. Over the top anxious. And of course he didn't come get her. And she went in. She got out her colored pencils and her drawing pencils, and we had all the erasers she needed and a big, beautiful piece of paper and extra paper if she needed it. She could start over as many times as she wanted. And she created her first still life. We started with warm-up exercises. We started with drawing just one artifact at a time and shading and introducing how to draw a sphere and how to make it three-dimensional and then add the shadows. And after 2.5 hours, she had created a still life. And then she stood and cried and couldn't believe that she had created this. Now, we ran this program for about 15 years, and every year I had teachers in tears and coming back. "I took this home and my husband framed it and it's hanging in the living room, and I didn't know I could do this." But when you slow down with people and you give them the basic skills, these are not mystical skills. These are things that can be learned and taught. And the reason they matter for people with trauma is to learn these kinds of difficult skills. You have to slow down and back up and reintegrate a lot of neurophysiology, relax, look, see, and notice. It's very mindful. You have to be in the moment and present, and it is so engaging that for all kinds of neurophysiology, it works. Whether my husband had really active, energetic. He's a male teacher in public school. He got all the hard boys. That's just kind of what they do, give them to the men.
Right. Lots of energy there. Yeah.
There's lots of energy. And I watched some boys who never sat still in another teacher's class sit for an hour and draw and get so captivated. So this isn't only for kids who can sit. This can captivate children who are not used to sitting because it engages so much of their mental and physical capacity in order to do this. And that's how children learn to extend their ability to pay attention and extend their ability to sit still is by doing something wonderfully engaging.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's huge.
It is. Well, and what we know about children of trauma, or adults who've been impacted by trauma, is that a lot of things we try to do to become more mindful backfire because sitting still without something engaging you in that way is horrible. Your thought, all the intrusive thoughts flood in, and all of those things happen. But when you're creating something, you have that, you have your attention elsewhere.
Yep, that distraction that gets you there. And they've Mary Helen Daniel Yang is a neurophysiologist that's very prominent, and she did this wonderful study about awe, and they had people hooked up to the MRIs, and they measured what happened in their brain when they would hear stories about awe. But what surprised her was when they left the room and the people were laying there, their brains went nuts, because in relaxation is when the brain got so active, and daydreaming is a super active time in the brain. So when you're drawing or doing something that slows you down to that place, you have that reflective daydreaming part of the brain happening too. And so you're activating far more than you can see. Trying to draw, they're thinking about their drawing, but it's alternating with daydreaming, and it's alternating with reflection. And you go to those places where it appears they're doing nothing, but the thinking that's happening is so powerful. And for those kids who have to be moving to know that they're alive and awake, suddenly they're so engaged, they can feel their aliveness, even though they're still. Their thinking is so deep and rich, and they get to choose it. They're exploring it, and that's what makes it so fun. Let's go beyond fine motor to music. When children get to sing every day, so it's not listening, it's singing.
Right.
And when you have someone with trauma, they may have certain inhibitions in their neurophysiology where they turn off their hearing because they need to, or they turn off being able to hear their own voice because maybe they screamed loudly and it scared them. And we want experiences where people in a relaxed way hear their own voice, hear the voice of others, and then have the opportunity to experience attunement across a group. So when you're teaching singing, it's more than just, here's the song, here's the words, now follow me. A qualified music instructor will have the kids, first of all, warm up their voices so they can hear the changes. Right. So this goes back to babbling. So if maybe they missed babbling when they were a kid, and so now you're just teaching them to vocalize again and how to listen to all of that, and maybe they do bubbling with their lips. So one of the games we play is a roller coaster game, and they might go, and it feels silly and it sounds silly, but it's relaxing their mouth. And it's relaxing their ability to hear. So my hand goes up and down, and that tells them when to go up and down, and they start to pay attention to, I can hear pitch. I can hear the curve of the tone. I can listen to my own voice. I can listen to my neighbor's voice. And as you're practicing just warming up the voice, you are actually rewiring the neurophysiology for the auditory processes of hearing and listening. And so we think that singing is just for fun. It isn't. It's relaxing the neurophysiology and allowing the body to experience these very complex processes in a relaxed and fun way. So then they start putting, maybe matching a pitch. So the teacher says, la, la, and the kids go, la, la, and you can start noticing with the kids who can match your pitch and who can't. Well, who needs a hearing test and who can't? And who can come into recess? Maybe they can match their pitch when there's no other people in the room. But now I'm getting in touch with, can they hear me? Can they listen? And when can they listen better? And we're starting to help them understand their own neurophysiology, because as they're listening, they're watching their own interoception, their own internal landscape and the external landscape, and they're starting to be aware, oh, I listen better when I stand up and walk. I can hear the pitch if I'm moving. But they start paying attention to what helps them be successful in listening and hearing. And then when they get some skills and they actually can match your pitch and they can sing some words, they hear their own voice singing with the voices of others. And then you have these cool vibrations that help them feel part of a community.
Mm.
When you sing with other people, your heart rates come in tune with each other, your breath rate comes in tune with each other, and it's a sense of community that these children don't experience in any other way.
Yeah.
So then you move that to let's make a beat.
Mhm.
How is that beat? Now, beat is absolutely universally soothing because we started in utero and we have our mother's heartbeat as our first self-regulator. So when you can help children every day, all of our schools should be drumming. They should be
Yes.
making
They should be.
every day. And
Mhm.
if they could start that soothing pattern of what's that beat and where can I put that beat and how does that feel in my body and walk with a beat. And now can we all keep the same beat? Or one of my favorite songs to do with kids is listen to the beat of my heart. How does your heart sound today? They might not have any words, but they could say, my heart sounds quiet and soft. I'm sad. That's
Mhm.
powerful and strong. I ran all the way to school, but they can show you the beat of their heart. And then that helps them put words to their emotions.
Mhm.
Then we can all say, let's match Harry's beat. Let's match Susanna's beat.
Right.
And we can start creating mathematical patterns and different beat is the first thing, and then you go to rhythm from that. And some kids can keep the beat and other kids can change the rhythm. But all of those musical skills help them repattern their body's ability to self-regulate around a rhythm. And as kids develop the ability to have beat, that's directly related to reading, the flow of reading. What's it
Mhm.
called? Fluency.
Yes.
With all of those patterns, that internal chronometer that keeps going. So that's, other applications of music and how it soothes. So, and we know that as parents with toddlers, when we start those kinds of games, what we forget is that even adults benefit from that. So as our
Mhm.
kids grow, we want to remember they do need to sing in the car. They do need to sing in classrooms. And if we would start every day with some music, moving to a beat and singing together, it would change. It would create a new homeostasis in the classroom.
Yes, for sure.
That's so interesting. I mean, I believe every word you're saying, and now I'm realizing at my kids' high school, every morning before the morning announcements start, the principal plays a song, and I'm always dropping off my middle schooler at the same time, and the schools are across the street. So I roll down the window and I'm like, "What song did she choose today?" But it's always a feel-good song, what
Yeah.
I would consider a feel-good song, and I've asked her about it before, and she's very intentional about which songs she chooses, and I've just always thought that's super cool, but boy, it's actually way more far-reaching than that,
Yes.
what she's doing, and maybe I don't know how far-reaching she's realizing that it's doing more than it is, but it's a beautiful way to start the day, and it impacts me, so I know it impacts the kids that are even hearing it much louder than I am across the street. Very cool.
Yeah. And you'll notice in the hallway, the kids will start walking to the beat of that,
Exactly.
Rhythm. Yeah.
changing their whole pacing. It changes, their internal chronometer gets activated and they start finding that rhythm and that groove, and they're experiencing that with the people around them.
Mhm.
I had put
Yeah.
on songs before a class and the kids will start singing. So I started putting
Yep.
up the words. If it's an old Beatles song or a James Taylor song, if I put up the words, they'll start
They're
singing
gonna
along
sing it. Yeah.
just because it's funny.
Yep.
But
Yep.
it speaks to that whole emotions are contagious and mirror neurons and co-regulation and that community. I mean, it's very layered, Callie. It's really powerful in a simple way. Like
Mhm.
that we
Yes.
already have access to, that's in the whole world around us, and all we have to do is be intentional about it
Mhm.
and say
Right.
yes to it.
Right.
And if we give, one of the things I've noticed about teenagers, and I've seen this a lot, if we don't give them access to quality information and quality ways to make art, they're going to do it their own way. We can't stop kids from making music or from making marks on walls or from telling stories. All we can do is give them tools to do it better and at a more elevated level so that they are actually making art about more elevated things, their personal expression and their ideas. They're
Mhm.
going to do it with us or without us. Let's just help them do it better.
Mhm.
Let's give them the right tools. Let's give them the right environment and the right opportunities. Their personal voice, their personal expression, their awareness of their own emotions, their awareness of their own stories. That's how they get to know themselves. That's the beginning of social and emotional work, is understanding self before you can
Right.
understand others. And when we give them these experiences, that's how they get to know themselves.
Mhm.
They need that reflective time of drawing or singing or writing a story, then telling a story. Then they need some tools of drama to make their story interesting, to
Right.
make it have climaxes and to make it have the emotional context that they felt when they experienced the story.
Mhm.
And if we don't teach them some drama techniques, they will never get that satisfaction out of their own stories. Or I shouldn't say never, they will get a higher satisfaction out of
There
their
you
stories.
go.
They'll have
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah,
Wow.
drama tools, music tools, dance, of course. We used to notice, can a child stand on one foot and hold their balance? Can they skip? Can they hop? Those were developmental indicators, and we now have fifth graders who can't skip. We now have, and if teachers and parents will learn to notice what are the physical skills, go back to those old developmental indicators in the cognitive realm, the physical realm, the emotional and the social realm. What can they do and where are they missing? And add the arts activities they need to target the areas where they're still weak. And if they can't skip, they're having a hard time reading. There's something that we could integrate that would improve all of that performance. If they can't draw and track what they're drawing with their eyes, they're having a hard time reading. And we don't spend enough time doing relaxed things for visual, what's it called when you're eye convergence, and
Yes.
relaxed way for eye tracking. All of these things that are natural behaviors that people have done for millennia are ways to nourish our neurophysiology in all four of those realms, and language development. If we go to the fifth development list of developmental indicators, linguistics is one of them. All of the singing things and in the mouth and diction and forming the mouth,
Yeah.
you work on those in singing class, and that's way more fun than a lot of other ways
Yes.
to
Yes.
practice.
It is.
So
Wow.
Callie, do you, with your arts partnership that you do this every year in June, is that kind of what you're teaching teachers to do? And how can that be replicated so that more can get this information?
That's a really great question. Our 2-day summer conference, Arts Express Summer Conference for Elementary Educators, focuses on giving people basic art skills. So a lot of this is happening just automatically, but they're getting some art skills, and then they're learning to integrate those art skills across the curriculum, and it's quite standards based. When we start talking about the trauma, then we get into the developmental indicators in the body and the neuroscience. And there are some of our teachers who bring that into that conference, but not all of them. But the magic is anyone who's teaching the arts is using and applying the neurophysiology, whether they can name it or not.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
Mhm.
So some of the best teachers I've ever watched are arts teachers, because they have different kinds of classroom management. They have different ways of giving students choice all of the time throughout the day. They're working towards communication and creativity and other soft skills that are critical. And the arts teachers are just pulling a lot of things together, and they're seeing it because it happens naturally in those locations, not because they have to really understand, oh, this is getting to the hippocampus and this is getting to their fine motor.
Right.
It happens even if they don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Still good.
Amazing.
So yeah, I love to teach the brain research with it because I think it does help people read other people's bodies and read their own bodies better.
Mhm.
And that's a really great starting place for being trauma informed. As you know, that you've got to self-regulate first before you can co-regulate with others.
Right.
Yep.
Yes. Yes.
So
And
I
it gives validation to the practice, right? As if arts really needed any more validation to its, as to its importance and usefulness. But to anybody who's thinking, well, this is soft skill, and do we really need it? Well, of course we really need it, because look at what it's doing to our brains now.
Yeah. Yep. And we need just to get to know who we are and find out what we love and our aesthetic choices and understand ourselves from the inside out. The arts are a fabulous way.
Mhm.
And those things get extended when we go out into nature or we go out into physical activity. Some people get this through sports, but then other kinds of physical activity. But when you get to those high levels of sports, it's the same kind of you're repatterning the motor development around something. And sometimes that becomes stress in those sports, and sometimes they need to stop and relax and do things. So yeah, we've got to have time to find our passions, and we need a wider palette to choose from.
Wow. Okay. Well, we did not have any trouble filling the time talking to you today at all.
I'm done. I have more questions.
I know.
Yeah, I kind of did take over there.
No, it was all great.
Anytime.
It was all great. But we would at some other time like to explore nature and other things that I know that we wanted to talk about. But I'm thinking that if I'm the listeners out there, I'm being the listener in here, my head is swimming with ideas, with practices that I want to try for myself. And I think that's good. I think you're leaving us in a really good place, because we're excited and curious, and
that's great. And I'll always talk to people more.
Awesome. So we will link to your book in the show notes. We're going to link to Brain Gym, just in case especially the parents out there don't know what that is. You said it, and I thought, it's been so long since I had littles with Brain Gym, but what a great program.
Yeah, and it really does give explicit ways to tie movement with certain kinds of desired behaviors. These movements reduce stress in these areas, and that's one useful part of Brain Gym.
Yes. Anything else, Ginger?
Yeah, no, I think we'll link everything we can that you said in the show notes, and connect listeners with you and your resources, and then we need to start thinking about a part B so that we can dive into other things too, because like I said, I just want to keep talking.
Yeah, there's many more conversations just to have in the arts.
There is. Well, thank you for the work you do, Kelly, because I love that you personally are passionate about tying it to trauma, to building resilience, to helping folks reduce their stress, because the world needs that so much right now.
Yes, we need it, don't we?
Mm-hmm. We really
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been really fun.
Awesome.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Regulated and Relational. Join us next time when Ginger and Julie will explore DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what these concepts have to do with being trauma-informed. It's an episode you won't want to miss. A special thanks to Joe Kramer for donating the music. To learn more about the Attachment and Trauma Network, visit us at www.attachtrauma.org. I'm Lauren Cassis, and as always, thank you for listening.